The small, isolated town of Rika had always been quiet, tucked away between high hills and dense forests. But today, the air was thick with tension. The usual peace was shattered by a loud, crumbling noise that echoed from the distance. It was the sound of something big, something dangerous. The whole town had heard it, but no one knew what to expect. Far beyond the town, a war had begun. The once dominant species of the planet, the aliens, had been pushed into desperation. They had been fighting amongst themselves for control, but now new enemies from distant galaxies were invading. Ships of unknown design filled the sky, blocking the sun and casting long dark shadows over the land. For the first time in a long while, Rika felt the true weight of danger. The people who lived here had only known peace, but the invaders were coming closer and closer. Among the chaos, a group of traders set up camp in the center of the town, hoping to make some profits off the situation. The traders were used to rough business deals where morality and kindness meant nothing. They only cared about getting what they wanted. But this time, they would face a situation they never expected. One of the traders, a man named Varek, had long been known for his ruthlessness. He had no patience for weakness, no care for those who were poor or desperate. He had just bought a young alien girl, one of the many slaves taken from the war. Her name was Zara, and she had been broken by the years of fighting. Her once powerful form was now frail, her skin pale from lack of sunlight, and her spirit crushed. Zara knelt on the ground, tied up, her eyes downcast, staring at the dirt. The trader, Varek, stood over her with a cruel smirk on his face. His voice was loud and sharp as he barked at her. "Just one bottle of liquor for a broken slave," he yelled, his voice filled with mockery. "You're worth nothing more than that." Zara barely moved, as though the words had no power to hurt her anymore. She had heard it all before. She had seen the cruelty of the traders, the way they bargained with her and others like her, as though they were nothing but objects. She had no hope left, but what Varek didn't know was that there was someone watching from afar, a human. One who wasn't like the others in the town. This human, a soldier named Kale, had come to Rika to escape the war and live in peace. But when he saw the alien girl, something stirred deep inside him. He couldn't stand by and watch her suffer like this. He had seen enough pain in the world to know that this was wrong. Kale moved quietly through the shadows, careful not to draw attention. His heart pounded in his chest as he observed the traders. He knew the odds were stacked against him. Varek had many men with him, and they were all armed and dangerous. But Kale had seen worse. He had been trained for combat, and he knew how to fight. The crowd in the town square had grown, curious about the traders and their new merchandise. Some of them looked at Zara with pity, others with disgust. But none of them dared speak up. Fear was too strong in this town. Fear of the invaders, fear of the traders, fear of everything that had been happening recently. But Kale couldn't just walk away. His heart told him that he had to do something. He couldn't let her be sold off for a bottle of liquor like some worthless item. He needed to act now. Kale took a deep breath, his hand on the hilt of his weapon. He had made his decision. There was no turning back now. The moment he stepped forward, he would be taking a stand for something greater than himself. He would be fighting for the girl who had been forgotten, for the broken soul who deserved more than just a life of chains and misery. As Kale's feet moved closer to the group, he didn't know that this would be the start of something much bigger than anyone in Rika could ever imagine. The first spark of hope in a world gone dark was about to ignite. Kale could feel the weight of every step as he moved through the crowd. His hand was steady, gripping the weapon at his side, but his mind raced. He wasn't sure what exactly he would do when he reached the traders, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let them get away with treating her like an object. The town square had grown quieter. almost as if the people were sensing that something was about to happen. The traders were still busy laughing and shouting among themselves, making deals and mocking the captured slaves. But Kale's focus was entirely on the girl kneeling before them, her fragile form barely visible under the harsh light of the torches that flickered around them. Varrock continued to taunt Zara, his voice cold and cruel. "You're nothing but a prize girl, a broken toy," he sneered. "No one cares about you. You're just a tool for trade." Zara didn't react. Her eyes were distant, hollow, as though she had already given up on life. But Kale could see it in her, a quiet strength, a flicker of defiance buried deep inside her. She wasn't as broken as she seemed. Kale reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pouch of coins, a last-minute decision he'd made on the way to the square. He didn't have much, but it might be enough to distract Varrock and his men. As he got closer, his heart pounded in his chest, and his mind raced through possibilities. His first move would need to be swift. Without thinking twice, Kale approached the traders, his voice calm but loud enough to be heard above the noise of the crowd. "I'll buy her," he said, stepping into their midst. The traders paused, surprised by the sudden interruption. Varrock turned slowly, his cold eyes narrowing as he saw the human standing before him. "You want her?" Varrock scoffed clearly, amused. "She's nothing but a worthless slave. You must be out of your mind to pay anything for her." Kale's eyes locked on Varrock's. His expression was calm, but there was a quiet intensity in his gaze. "I'll pay you. Whatever you want, just let her go." The traders laughed, as if they had heard the most ridiculous thing. "A human wants a broken alien slave? What are you going to do with her? Keep her as a pet?" But Kale didn't flinch. "If that's what it takes to save her, then yes." Varrock shook his head, his grin growing wider. "You're desperate, aren't you? All right then, if you're willing to pay, we'll make a deal. But it won't be cheap. You've got no idea what you're getting yourself into." The traders exchanged glances, whispering among themselves, considering the deal. They could see the desperation in Kale's eyes, the willingness to pay whatever it took to rescue her. It was rare to see someone willing to go so far for a slave, especially in these times. Zara, who had been listening silently, lifted her head slightly. For the first time since the traders had captured her, she dared to meet Kale's eyes. Her gaze was tired, but there was something more, something like hope. She didn't know this man, but she could feel his sincerity. He wasn't like the others. As the traders continued to haggle, Kale knew that time was running out. His instinct told him to be patient, but every moment that passed felt like an eternity. He couldn't just stand there and watch her suffer. He had to act quickly. The traders were all business, and the price they were asking for Zara was more than he could afford. But he wasn't about to back down. "I don't care about the price," Kale said, his voice steady now. "Name it, and I'll pay." Varrock looked him over, sizing him up. Kale could feel the man's eyes scanning him, weighing his worth. Then, with a sneer, Varrock made his move. 100 credits. "That's what it'll cost. And if you don't have it, then you'll have to leave without her. She's nothing to us." Kale swallowed hard, trying to hide the shock on his face. 100 credits was more money than he had ever seen in his life, but he didn't hesitate. He reached into his pouch, pulling out every last coin he had. It wasn't nearly enough, but he hoped it would be. To his surprise, Varrock took the money with a smirk, his eyes gleaming. "Fine, you want her? She's yours. But remember this, human. You've just bought a broken slave. Don't think for a second you can fix her." With that, Varrock signaled to one of his men to release Zara. She was pulled roughly to her feet, her chains rattling as she stumbled forward. Kale could see the fear in her eyes, but also a flicker of something else, something deeper, like she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone cared about her. Zara didn't speak as she stood before Kale. She was still weak, But there was something powerful in the way she held herself. Cale didn't say anything at first. He simply nodded to her, silently promising that he wouldn't let her down. The traders walked away, leaving Cale and Zara alone in the square. The noise of the crowd had faded, and a deep silence hung in the air. Cale knew that the hardest part was yet to come. He had no idea how he would help her, or what he had gotten himself into, but he was determined to see this through. For her, and for the hope that she might still have a future. Cale stood there in the quiet aftermath of the trade, feeling the weight of his decision. He had done it, he had bought Zara, but now what? He looked down at the alien girl standing before him, still chained and fragile, her eyes full of uncertainty. She wasn't looking at him with gratitude, but with suspicion. She had learned long ago that trust was a dangerous thing. For years, she had been treated as a commodity, something to be bartered for the highest bidder. And now Cale had come along, claiming to want to help her. But could she really trust him? Could she believe that a human could offer her something different from the cruelty she had endured? The silence between them stretched on, and Cale wasn't sure what to say. Words seemed insufficient. What could he offer her that would make her believe he was different from the others? He hadn't even thought through the consequences of what he had done. He had just acted on instinct. Zara finally broke the silence, her voice a quiet, broken whisper. "Why?" Cale blinked, not sure if he had heard her correctly. She was looking at him now, her pale face etched with confusion and disbelief. "Why did you buy me?" She repeated, her voice shaky but demanding an answer. Cale took a deep breath. He didn't have a perfect answer, but he knew it was one he had to give. He looked into her eyes and said, "I couldn't just stand by and watch you be treated like an object. I believe you deserve more than this." Zara scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "More," she repeated, shaking her head. "I'm nothing but a slave." "You think I deserve more than this? You're wasting your time." Cale felt a pang of frustration in his chest. He could hear the anger and pain in her words, and he understood it all too well. It was the same pain he had felt when he had lost everything in the war. But he couldn't let her give up hope. "I don't care about your past. I care about your future," he said firmly. "You're not a slave anymore. You don't belong in chains." Her eyes hardened, and for a moment, Cale thought she might lash out. But instead, she looked away, her expression guarded. She didn't believe him, and who could blame her? She had been betrayed too many times. Cale sighed. "I'm not going to force you to go anywhere with me, Zara. You don't have to trust me right now. But I'll give you a choice. You can stay here in the town, or you can come with me. If you come with me, I'll do my best to help you, but only if you want that." Zara's expression remained unreadable, and Cale could feel the weight of the moment. She was still trapped in the darkness of her past, and it wasn't going to be easy to pull her out of it. He knew that. But the smallest flicker of hope was enough for him to keep trying. For a long time, there was no response from her. The only sound was the faint crackling of a nearby fire and the distant hum of the city in chaos. It was as if the world around them had stopped, holding its breath. Finally, Zara spoke again. This time, her voice was softer, quieter, almost to herself. "Why would you want to help someone like me?" Cale's answer was simple, yet filled with sincerity. "Because everyone deserves a chance, even you." Zara didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, Cale thought she might walk away. But then slowly, she reached up to her wrists and pulled at the chains that bound her. They rattled but didn't give. The sound echoed in the stillness, a reminder of everything she had endured. Cale's heart tightened at the sight. He could see how much the chains meant to her, not as a physical barrier, but as a symbol of the life she had lived, of the people who had owned her, of the cruelty that had been done to her. But in that moment, he made a promise to himself. He would help her break free from these chains, from the past that held her down. I can't promise that things will be easy, Kale said, stepping forward and gently placing a hand on her shoulder. But I can promise that I'll try. And I won't give up on you. Zara stared at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then, as if making up her mind, she slowly nodded, just barely. I'll go with you, she said, her voice still quiet, but now tinged with a hint of something, perhaps hope, or the smallest shred of trust. Kale nodded back, his own heart beating faster. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was a promise, a commitment to help her find the freedom and dignity she had been denied for so long. The two of them turned and walked away from the town square, Kale leading the way. They didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, Zara felt a small spark of something she had long forgotten. The possibility of a different life. As they left the square behind them, the sound of the town's chaos faded, replaced by a new kind of silence. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers, but Zara wasn't walking alone anymore. And that, for now, was enough. The journey out of Rika was slow and uncertain. The town, once quiet and peaceful, was now teeming with fear and uncertainty. News of the invaders spread like wildfire, and every corner of the town seemed on edge. People whispered about the upcoming battles, the looming threat that was growing closer with each passing day. Kale and Zara walked in silence for most of the journey, the weight of their decision still heavy in the air between them. As they traveled through the dense forests outside Rika, the tension between them began to ease, though only slightly. Zara had yet to speak much, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings, as if expecting danger to leap out at them from the shadows. Kale could feel her unease, and he couldn't blame her. She had lived her life in fear, and trust was a foreign concept to her. Kale didn't press her to talk. He knew that trust would take time, and he was willing to give her that. His goal was simple, to get her to safety. Where that safety was, he didn't know. He had no plan beyond taking one step at a time, hoping that something would come to him as they moved forward. The world outside the town was vast, and Kale wasn't sure where to turn. They made camp that night under the shelter of a thick cluster of trees. The moonlight filtered through the leaves, casting a soft glow over the small fire Kale had managed to start. He knew they couldn't stay in one place for long, but they needed rest. And the night had come quickly. Kale sat by the fire, his eyes fixed on the flames, but his mind wandered to everything that had happened. The war, the traitors, the broken girl now sitting across from him. Everything felt surreal. How had his life come to this? How had he ended up in the middle of something so much bigger than himself? Zara sat across from him, her arms wrapped around her knees, her eyes distant. She didn't look at the fire. Instead, she stared into the dark forest, as though searching for something, or maybe running from it. She hadn't spoken since their departure, and Kale hadn't pushed her. But as the night deepened, he knew he couldn't remain silent forever. Zara, he said softly, breaking the silence. You don't have to stay silent. You can talk if you want to. Her eyes flickered toward him, but she didn't respond. Kale waited, his gaze steady. He wasn't asking her to share everything. He wasn't asking for details of her past. But he wanted to offer her something more than the silence they shared. I know you've been through a lot, Kale continued. I can't pretend to understand what you've gone through, but I want you to know. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not like them. Zara's jaw tightened, her eyes still focused on the darkness. For a moment, Kale thought she wouldn't respond. But then, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I can trust you, she said, the words heavy with years of pain. You're human. You're all the same. Kale nodded, his expression not faltering. I understand why you feel that way, but not all humans are the same. And not everyone who's here is your enemy. Zara's gaze finally turned back to him. There was something in her eyes, a flicker of something, perhaps curiosity, or maybe just the faintest trace of hope. Why did you help me? She asked, her voice soft but filled with confusion. You don't know me. You don't know what I am, what I've done. Why would you care? Kale didn't hesitate. Because you matter. Because you deserve a life. Without chains. I know it's hard to believe, but I'm not leaving you behind. The silence stretched again, but this time it wasn't as heavy. Kale could see the battle within her. She was torn between the fear of being betrayed once more, and the slim chance that maybe, just maybe, there was someone who would fight for her. As the night wore on, Kale couldn't help but wonder how long it would take before she truly trusted him. He wasn't looking for perfection. He knew that healing would take time. But the first step was done. He had rescued her from the traitors, and she had agreed to follow him. That, in itself, was progress. The next morning, they set off again. The sun rising slowly behind them, casting a soft golden light on the path ahead. Kale didn't know what dangers lay ahead, but he knew that the hardest part of their journey was just beginning. He had promised to help her, but that was easier said than done. Zara wasn't the only one who needed healing. Kale did too. He had his own scars, his own brokenness. But for the first time in a long while, he felt like he might have a reason to fight for something greater than himself. They continued their journey, the road stretching before them, uncertain but filled with possibility. The war was still raging in the distance, and Kale knew they couldn't escape the chaos forever. But with each step they took, something small but significant began to change. Zara wasn't a slave anymore, and neither was Kale. They were both fighting for freedom from the past, and freedom to shape their own futures. As they walked deeper into the wilderness, Kale glanced over at Zara. She was walking beside him, her steps slower but more deliberate. She wasn't looking at him, but he could sense that she wasn't as closed off as she had been before. There was something in the way she held herself. Maybe it was a small shift, but it was there. And for the first time, Kale believed they might just find the freedom they both needed. The days passed slowly as Kale and Zara continued their journey through the wilderness. The forests were dense and the roads treacherous, but they pressed on, step by step. Every now and then, Kale would look over at Zara, and he could see that she was slowly starting to open up, just a little. She no longer looked at him with suspicion. All the time, though she still had moments of doubt. He didn't blame her. Trust was something that had been broken in her time as a slave. They had found a small, hidden cave to rest in for the night, far away from the busy roads. Kale kept watch while Zara tried to rest, though sleep seemed to elude her. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows on the walls of the cave. Zara sat with her back against the stone, her knees pulled up to her chest, her face deep in thought. Kale couldn't help but wonder what was going on in her mind. Her past had been a nightmare, one he couldn't fully understand. He wanted to help, but he also knew that the weight of her experiences couldn't just be erased with kindness and words. She needed time. I never thought I'd be free, Zara suddenly said, breaking the silence. Her voice was quieter than usual, almost like she was talking to herself. I never thought I'd leave the traitors. Or that I'd ever be anywhere else but in chains. Kale looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. But you're free now, he said softly, trying to reassure her. You don't have to live like that anymore. You're not their property. You have a choice now. Zara shook her head slowly, almost sadly. Freedom, she whispered, isn't something that comes easily. Not for me. Not after everything I've been through. Kale didn't know how to respond to that. He didn't know the right words to say to someone who had been through so much. But he did know one thing. He wasn't going to leave her side. She might not believe in freedom yet, but he would help her get there. It might take time, but he would stay with her, fighting for her until she saw it for herself. The night passed quietly, and by the time the first light of dawn touched the sky, they were on the move again. The road ahead still seemed long and uncertain, But Kale could feel something different in the air. It was as though a shift had begun between them. A small step toward healing. As they traveled, they encountered more dangers, wild creatures lurking in the shadows, raiders looking for easy targets, and rough terrain that tested their endurance. But each time they faced something new, they managed to overcome it together. Kale's skills as a soldier helped, but it was Zara's quiet resilience that kept them both going. She had seen death up close and personal. She had survived things most people couldn't even imagine. Kale wasn't sure where she found the strength to keep going, but it was there. One afternoon, as they passed through a small valley, they came upon a group of travelers. They were human like Kale, but their eyes were sharp, their expressions wary. These were not the kind of people Kale had expected to meet in the wilderness. They were hardened with a look that suggested they had seen too much of the war and its aftermath. The leader of the group, a tall man with graying hair and a scar across his face, stepped forward. "What brings you two out here?" he asked, his voice gruff but not unfriendly. Kale hesitated, unsure how to respond. He wasn't in the mood for explaining his situation to strangers. But Zara, standing beside him, spoke up before he could say anything. "We're just passing through," she said, her voice calm but steady. "We mean no harm." The man studied her for a moment, then turned his attention back to Kale. "You're with her, huh? A human and an alien. Doesn't happen often. What's your story?" Kale didn't want to get into the details. "We're just trying to get away from the war," he said. "No reason to cause trouble." The man grunted, seeming satisfied. With the answer, he motioned to his group. "Well, you're welcome to join us for a while. We're headed in the same direction. But I'll warn you, there's a lot of danger out here. If you're not prepared, you'll end up as easy pickings for raiders or worse." Zara stayed quiet, her gaze fixed on the group. She hadn't been around many humans since her captivity, and Kale could see that she was wary of them. The scars of her past were still fresh in her mind, and every new encounter felt like a test of trust. But Kale could see that these travelers weren't the same as the traders. They weren't hostile, just cautious. They had no reason to be kind. But they were offering help. And Kale knew that taking the offer was the best option for now. "We'll travel with you for a while," Kale said, his voice steady. "But we're not looking for trouble." The leader gave a slight nod, and the group fell in behind them. They traveled together for the rest of the day, the distance between Kale and Zara, and the strangers, slowly shrinking. The human travelers didn't ask too many questions, and Zara seemed to relax just a little, though she remained guarded. That night, as they sat around a campfire with their new companions, Zara said something that surprised Kale. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible. Kale looked at her, surprised by the words. He wasn't sure if it was just gratitude for the safety of the night or something more. But either way, it was a small step. A shift. "You're welcome," Kale replied, offering her a small smile. "I'm just glad you're with me." And for the first time in a long while, Zara didn't look away from him. There was something different in her eyes, a quiet recognition, a glimmer of trust. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Kale. It was a sign that maybe, just maybe, they were on the right path. The days blurred together as Kale and Zara continued their journey with the group of travelers. The wilderness stretched on endlessly, but the human company had made the road a little easier to bear. Zara's demeanor had changed. She still wasn't completely free of the scars from her past, but her spirit was slowly, subtly shifting. Each passing day, she grew more open, more willing to trust, just a little. The journey was not without its dangers. They faced wild creatures, sudden storms, and more raiders. But Kale and the others fought bravely, keeping each other safe. Every night around the campfire, the conversations grew less strained. Zara began to speak more, sharing small stories of her life before the war, before the traders. She didn't go into details, But it was a sign that she was starting to believe that not everyone was out to hurt her. One evening, as they set up camp in a secluded valley, the leader of the group, the scarred man named Joran, pulled Kale aside. "You've got a good one there," Joran said, his tone thoughtful. "She's strong, that girl. I can see it." Kale nodded. "She's been through more than most people could ever imagine. I'm just trying to help her find a new life." Joran glanced toward the fire where Zara sat. "She's a fighter, even if she doesn't know it yet. But you might want to keep an eye on her. She's still haunted by her past." Kale understood. "I'm not going anywhere," he said firmly. The next day, as they traveled further into the unknown, they came to a fork in the road. Kale knew. They were close to the edge of the war zone now, where soldiers and invaders clashed daily. It wasn't safe, and they could only push so far before danger would catch up with them. He had to make a decision. He had promised Zara freedom, but what kind of freedom could they really find in a world still torn by war? It was at that moment, standing at the fork in the road, that Kale realized something he hadn't fully understood before. His journey with Zara wasn't just about helping her escape. It was about finding a place for both of them, a place where they could leave the past behind, a place where they could build a future together. It didn't matter where that place was, just that they would find it. Zara, who had been silent for much of the day, walked up beside him. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at the roads ahead. Her expression was thoughtful, serious. "This is it, isn't it?" she asked quietly. "We can't keep running forever." Kale turned to her, seeing the deep thought in her eyes. "No, we can't, but I think we found something better than running. We found a choice." Zara looked at him, really looked at him for the first time, as if seeing him without the lens of suspicion or fear. "I never thought I'd get a choice again," she said softly, her voice tinged with awe and uncertainty. "I thought my life was always going to be someone else's." Kale smiled. "Now it's yours. Where do you want to go, Zara? This is your life now. I'm just here to help you." She stood there for a long moment, the weight of the decision heavy in the air. Then, without a word, she walked past him, heading down one of the paths. Kale, curious, followed after her. Zara didn't look back at him, but her pace was steady, determined. Kale quickened his steps to keep up, realizing that she had made her choice. She was ready to take control of her own future. For the first time in a long time, she had found the courage to step forward. As the group followed down the road behind them, Kale felt something he hadn't in years: hope. Not just for Zara, but for himself as well. They were leaving behind the past, the pain, the chains, literally and figuratively. Whatever awaited them ahead, they would face it together. They had each other. The sun set behind them, casting long shadows across the path. Kale looked at Zara, walking with a purpose, and realized that, despite everything they had been through, this was just the beginning. The road ahead was still uncertain, but they would travel it together. And maybe, just maybe, that was the truest freedom either of them had ever known. They walked toward the horizon, toward an unknown future, but for the first time in a long time, Zara didn't feel like she was walking alone. And neither did Kale.